Okay, I'll have to get it.
Yeah, fire it up. So when
All
you get
right.
the live, are we live? I'm going to send
We
a link
are
right through my
live.
YouTube.
We
Welcome,
are
everybody.
live. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? Good to see you. As you could see, David and I were already engrossed in conversation. So let me just say favor to everybody. Thank you for tuning in and welcome, David, back. Man, it is just a pleasure to have you back on. And I can't think of something more timely than the subject matter that you cover.
Well, we all need to eat every day. And I do believe that everything that we're seeing across the planet is governments preemptively locking us down and putting what would be a tumultuous situation in advance to clamp down. Because that book I wrote, Climate Revolution, as well as all the research I've done in the last 6 years about this, food prices were going to be the catalyst for civil unrest globally. So knowing that is happening right now, governments would preemptively jump in to try to take control of the situation before it was already out of control. It's easier to do it in advance, right?
Hey,
Than it is to try to control it after it's out of control.
if you control the narrative, you control the pace.
Correcto. So yeah, go ahead with the introduction. As you do that, I want to take some notes here. Maybe, anybody out there, if you have some ideas, I'm on the chat board here, also in the video. And I'm going to send this through my feed too, asking people to come over to join us. So
Excellent.
yeah, if you have any ideas or thoughts today, please throw them out, because the world we're living in is going to take a combined effort of everybody sharing solutions, ideas, thoughts, and maybe that'll be the last piece, oh, the Rubik's Cube unlocked, it's one of you out there listening today, whatever it might be. So
well, listen, I say that moment of inspiration and innovation can spark anywhere. And you're spot on about we need some answers because, I try to keep it positive on this channel. I deal with a lot of subjects, but yours is one, as you said, everyone has to eat. I mean, that there's no separation in that. If you're going to stay alive, you're going to have to eat something. And it seems like that is going to become, well, I guess more of a novelty in the future.
it certainly is. Now, think about that. You might be saying, no, I'm not going to take the vaccine or get the jab or anything like right now. There's going to be a lot of people that'll say that at the moment. But when it comes down to you either have the certificate so you can go into a supermarket or go somewhere to purchase food, and your kids are hungry, you're hungry, you might very well change your mind. So by using food as the weapon to get people to stand in line, this is the way we're going to. So if you can focus on the food first, food second, food third, and then understand that we're at a 46-year high in terms of inflation in the last 2 months. It happened so fast, 2 months, and suddenly we're at 46-year highs in food prices in 2 months. So with all this never-ending money printing, where are we going to go from there? Because if you can't afford your food, you're going to be really relying on the stimulus. And I was saying that food prices were going to get exponentially more expensive anyway. So how would they pacify and keep people from rioting? They were going to have to increase the EBT spendings or just outright give full-on money to people. This is way before any of this happened. And then here we are talking about the exact same thing today. It's unbelievable. It really is.
I went to the grocery store this morning, sir. I went there at 5:30 in the morning, and meat prices have probably jumped 30%. Milk, eggs, all have gone up. We're seeing increase in prices in bread. These are basic, what they call staples. And the staples, I think they said this morning, nearly 4% in April that the prices jumped. As you just pointed out, that's a 50% annual increase on the prices. I mean, that's hyperinflation to the tilt.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you there.
Okay,
And
good.
And you know why I'm going to disagree with you?
Okay.
Because I went to the store the other day and all the milk products I bought were 25% more expensive.
Milk.
And milk, dairy, yogurts,
Yeah.
because there are a couple of types of yogurt that I really like, and it comes in the bigger quart jars versus buying the tiny little ones. So I like to, get it out. I mix different kind of grains with it, and I put honey on top. So I want to have at least,
Delicious.
four servings out of one of the bigger ones. So I like to buy the bigger jugs out of that. So I'm used to paying a certain price for it, and then suddenly it was 25% higher. And that was just in a week. And then I talked to a guy working there, and he's like, everything went up 25%, everything. He's like, the meat, if you can even get it, it's up 30%. I was like, well, holy smokes, this is out in an area where there's actually agricultural production. So I'm wondering what's happening where they need to import things, because that was a huge jump so fast. And then
Mhm.
my parents went shopping today. I talked to them and took a picture of all the things they bought. They had a couple steaks and just some, bag of groceries. Like, spent $107 for this. And I was like, what?
I
What?
saw two top sirloin steaks, uh, $35. I mean, that's that's
Yeah.
going to Ruth Chris. That's the type of where you want to go out to a fine dining restaurant. It's nuts.
I think that's going to be your home cooking price. So what's the price of restaurants going to be, especially when our dollar becomes worth less and less and less? The reason everything is jumping in price, it's not because there's a bottleneck somewhere in the supply chain. I mean, that's just a fraction of the price increase. The real price increase is because we're printing so much money and our dollars are worth less.
And they're
So as we
about to
keep
print a whole
printing
lot
into
more.
yeah, and as we printing in, they're talking about adding another 16 trillion on top. So the Fed balance sheet is what, almost 7 trillion now. They want to bring that up to 16 to 20 trillion. And then Pelosi and their whole crew wants to give another 3.3 trillion in stimulus. Plus, on top of that, the regular money printing. We're talking doubling the national debt in less than a year. So if we go from 25 trillion up to 50 trillion, what's that going to do with our money? No, it's going to make it worth less and less every single day.
Rand Paul said it best. He said this last 3 trillion, he said it's worthless. There's nothing backing it up.
Zero. It's just inflation built in. So
Yeah.
when you go start to see your food prices increasing, understand that it's not about the bottleneck in supply chain. That would be maybe a couple percent at the most, because they could, move things around on the chessboard, if you will. It's all about the printing of the money, and your money's worth so much less now. And I'll tell you a little story about traveling in Zimbabwe, if you let me.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. So back in 1993, went on a surf trip down to South Africa. And we had a couple weeks left. So we wanted to go up to this place called Victoria Falls up in Zimbabwe. And we had our own car because we'd been surfing along the coast and bought this old beat up
Sweet.
car. Yeah, down to South Africa. And we drove around for 4 months surfing down the coast. We had a bit of extra time. So we went up to Vic Falls up there. And hyperinflation had just started in Zimbabwe. So 3 months prior to us arriving, the exchange rate was 1.1 US dollar to one Zimbabwe. So it actually cost more US dollars to buy one Zimbabwe dollar than it did to get a US dollar. But when we arrived there, it was 10 Zimbabwe dollar to a dollar. Now, the lifestyle arbitrage on that was unbelievable, because South African rand had devalued quite a bit as well. So we were living high on the hog there. A few bucks and you're in a steak restaurant drinking wine, because the 10-to-1 ratio, they hadn't adjusted any of the prices yet. So hotels, travel, the food, restaurants, and everything, it hadn't caught up yet, because it just rose too fast and people hadn't adjusted the prices. By the time we left, it was 20-to-1, and they were just starting to, tweak the prices for the average person at that point, where, if you saw something in the market, it wouldn't be double the price, but they'd taken it up 50 or 60%, knowing that everything else had jumped 20x. So they started to catch up and move prices at that point. So we hit that sweet spot. I didn't realize it at that point, what I had stumbled into and what I lived through. I was just like, hey man, it's cool. We got this amazing lifestyle here for just pennies a day. And now I'm understanding that we're starting to live it here too now. This is the very first phase of when our dollar starts to go much higher. Because if you had a Swiss franc in 6 months, you're going to get way more for the exchange rate of what you would do, and how much food that could buy, and how much travel and entertainment that could provide for a short amount of, for a small amount, I should say, of.
Yeah.
So I'll leave it there. That's my Zimbabwe. I actually lived through part of the beginning of the hyperinflation. And you know what? I'm seeing it again right now. Hard to explain, but I'm seeing our prices move this quick. This is what happened in Zimbabwe.
Well, I live in Colorado, and our governor today is meeting with the president. So in 5 weeks, we went from, because state here, the Constitution has the budget has to be balanced. We have gone now to a projected 3 billion deficit. And that has catastrophic effect to it, because that's slashing government jobs, so to speak, that they're not going to be easily replaced. the taxes are down, are because no one's at work. Restaurants are going to become, the only thing I can say, they're going to become checkpoints. David, you and I were talking before that Washington State is apparently going to implement this, that when the restaurants open, those who go in have to get their temperature, give their name, provide ID, email address, current phone number. That information is then sent to the state of Washington to track you in the event that if you happen to be in an area that where there's an outbreak, they've got you and they will take the measures to come get you.
That's in Kansas also,
Kansas?
as well as Washington State. So now, see how quickly it's moving. First it was one state, now it's two. How long do you think it'll be 3, 4, and 5? I would say less than a week, and we'll see a third state doing the same.
Yeah. And then it's going to become nationwide.
Exactly.
CDC is going to recommend it that.
Oh yeah.
So let's talk about the shortages and uh, one of your channel, Adapt 2030, you've really been on this. And right before we came on, I pulled up, and I'll show you the current drought monitor for the United States. And here in Colorado, 60% of our state is in a drought of some stage. And as you can see, there are now pockets of what they call extreme drought. You and I were talking previous that the last year when they were planting the winter wheat for the harvest that will be coming in about now, due to early frost, freeze, snows, they didn't get them planted in the way they want. So what I'm trying to get all to this, how do you see this in the overall picture going forward with the availability of food?
Well, the U.S. wheat planting is down again this year, and you need to ask yourself, why is it down again? Some of the wheat plant acres in Texas is at a 100-year low, but then they've switched over to sorghum to be able to absorb some of those acres. Now, you know, availability of food, how able are you to switch your diet and try new foods and substitute some of your staples into that? I mean, when's the last time you had a dish of sorghum or millet on your table compared to a loaf of bread? But if they're going to be substituting, yeah, we got to go back pioneering lifestyle.
Yeah.
When people used to eat this sorghum regular, that was a regular staple.
You know, I've seen it because I know it used to be a side crop down in Texas. I just never even know what they put sorghum in. Bread, is that right? A substitute for wheat. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, a lot of people use it as a substitute grain for cooking with soups, and it's very much like couscous, or you could cook it into a very almost like fluffy, dry dish to put on your plate in substitute of rice or something like that.
Yeah.
And also the canes, I don't know if you knew this, a main reason that they were growing it is in the cane, like they got the big, usually it comes out in 3 heads at the top, about a pound each. So they're getting 3 pounds of grain per plant. But in the stalks, there's a lot of sugar in there. So what they do is they run it through a mill press and they squeeze all the juice out, and then they refine it down, boil it down, and you get sugar. So sorghum sugar was a thing that people used to use before there was cane sugar.
Okay.
Yeah, like beet sugar, you know, they got from the sugar beets, same thing. Well, you can do, you know, as kids, you know, you used to be able to chew on the stalks of that stuff. It's not as sweet as sugar cane, but as a kid,
I did not
be happy with what you get, right? Yeah. I mean, we grew up in a different time, you and I. The kids won't be nibbling on cane stalks these days. It just doesn't happen.
No, we used to eat black-eyed peas because we were weeding the garden. We were working, and you know, they were quite tasty. I'm going back some. So this is interesting. So we're seeing the shortages. I mean, as I look at this, how do you see the weather? Because, you know, that's what you hear in climate change, that it's, you know, we're actually, I heard someone here locally actually making reference that they're anticipating a mega drought in the Southwest, spreading into the breadbasket of the United States. And if that does materialize, then I don't know, where do we go and buy the wheat there or the corn that we need?
Well, I have a little bit different information that says that North American monsoon is shifting on a 4,000 year cycle here into a much, much wetter. Now it might be dry into this spring period here a
Okay.
little bit, but as we get more into the summer months, the airflows coming off the Pacific are further south. So it should be pulling a lot of moisture straight up in there. I mean, they've had what, the fourth year of increasing rainfall. And then last year they had the most rain ever in that area. But again, and it makes no sense to me because last year Colorado had the biggest, deepest, thickest snowpack ever of, 9, 10x over the
Yeah.
averages.
Yeah. It
And
was
now this
beautiful.
year they're having a drought, but they had an enormous amount of snowpack again this year. So I don't know where some of the figures are coming off for stream flows and things off the melt, or I mean, it melts and then it's totally gone and there's been zero rainfall, but then we've had front after front after front coming through with moisture pushing. So
You
not
guys
really,
have gotten a lot of rain out in the East Coast, haven't you?
yeah, an enormous amount, plus the record breaking snows the last few days, latest snows ever recorded in New York City and Central Park, going back to 1880. And the deepest snows just shattering so many records. You got 8 inches of snow coming in the second week of May in some places. I mean, really, it's beyond. But the media had to cover it because Washington, D.C. at Dulles Airport set new record low temperatures. I mean, that's right in the middle of Washington. You have to cover that. And record snow, latest snow in Central Park. No way to bury that in the media because, well, it's in Central Park. So
So
some of these
why
things
put
had
it
to be covered, right? Because it was such a vast area. But if that was in the middle of Kansas somewhere, never been. It would have been reported locally, local news. Never would have made national and international news. No way.
So how did that impact the crops that are in the ground on the Northeast, particularly? I would say probably devastating.
If it was cold enough to freeze, because even in Southeast US down here in Tennessee, we had 3 nights that it went right near freezing. So, it was much colder further north. Now, the emergence of the buds and the flowers on the trees for fruit, and also some of the early leafy veg was up. And then farmers planted a sliver early this year because it got warmer. Remember back last month in April, it was really warm in the beginning. And they probably thought, well, the winter's over. It's been a mild winter. It's done. But then we got the super freeze here. So even some of the grasses, like the wheatgrass and other things, were coming out and emerging. If it was cold, the snow won't bother them. The snow actually insulates the plants. But if it was the cold that was below freezing and froze that, because they had freeze warnings out, like hard freeze warnings, wherever that hard freeze went up in that whole Northeast quadrant there from Illinois over to New York, they lost their crops in the fields, left to replant. Luckily, it's still early. And if it wasn't too wet, hopefully they'll get back in the fields again. That's devastating for a farmer, though. You plant out your whole field and then it's lost. What's the seed cost, fuel cost, fertilizer cost, all these things going back in again, second round.
Going to jack it up. And we got hit really hard here in Colorado with that April freeze. It went down to 3 below zero. Literally killed my lilacs. In fact, our trees here still haven't budded yet. They were budding at that point, and they just simply had, the killer freeze on it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, because you're even understanding that it doesn't matter what kind of tree, whether it's an edible or a non-edible, a flower freezes at below zero.
Yeah, yeah, and
they're definitely impacted. So
yeah. So you see this, not the global warming, but actually the global cooling, right?
well, think about it. How many airplanes are not flying either? Because a lot of the airplane, now, whether you believe it's geoengineering or whatever, okay, that's for a different conversation.
Yeah.
I'm just saying the amount of particulate in the sky from air travel is significantly less. So the heat being trapped under. So I'm wondering if the geoengineering and all these other programs were not to trap heat in to falsely claim the global warming narrative, because you knew for sure that was going to trap heat. Now that all the cloud layers are gone and everything can evaporate at night and come down to the true real temperatures, now we're starting to see a drop off. Like the University of Huntsville, Alabama, Dr. Roy Spencer's site, if you go there, it's UAH, University of Alabama, Huntsville, it's a data set. And they were showing the second largest drop for 2 months in the entire record so far. This is the steepest drop off since the 1970s. No, 1980. 1981 was the last time. The single 2 month drop in temperature. We were just about almost 1/100 of a degree off the last record breaking 2 month drop. So we're getting real close. If it drops a third month in a row like it did prior, and we very, very well might see, because there's 5 continents with extreme cold below normal. If May drops under that, then it'll be the record-breaking fastest drop since the satellite era has begun, which is a complete opposite of what you're told of global warming. minus the airplanes. See, now we start to think about what were the airplanes really up there for and what kind of effect did they have by trapping heat.
Mm-hmm.
This is where we go. Take it
Mm-hmm.
into you trap the heat on purpose and then you blame the global warming. Right on. I get you.
Carbon tax, altering lifestyles, more impediment on freedoms of choice. All right. So
I'm
that
trying to find it. I'm trying to find you a chart here. So please continue
no,
on.
no, because
Dabbling in I got too many videos, images scrolled lined up. I'm trying to find something, a needle in a haystack while I talk here.
well, that all just continues to lead then to higher prices for food. Um, I found it was interesting. I read the story on, I watched the commodity markets,
Mm-hmm.
and Iran just recently purchased 1 billion metric tons of wheat from Kazakhstan, which I did not know that Kazakhstan actually apparently produces a very large volume of wheat. And when they ask, the story went on to say that the reason that Iran did that was that they're preparing their stockpiles.
Correct. And those stand countries that you rarely hear about, I mean, they got the other ones over like
Yeah, I
Tajikistan,
keep up with them.
Kyrgyzstan. There's a whole there's a
Like,
whole list of stands over there. But after that sale, you know what they did? They cut all wheat exports from that point forward. So the last sale, as we know it, coming out of there, it's a pretty large breadbasket. The last sale was to Iran, and then they're stopping all exports out.
that's troubling.
And who else did that? Poland. No, was it Poland? There was another Northern European country that cut off all the exports of grain out of there as well.
This whole pandemic, this is going to have ripple effects in, the complete food chain itself. I mean, you've got countries now shutting off exports. You've got other countries, particularly in Africa. Um, we have viewers in South Africa. It's really tough down there from what I'm hearing. Food is becoming a major, major igniting point. Um, and it's all wrapped into this pandemic virus and the totalitarian steps that the South African government is taking. As a result, people are going without food.
You have some friends who are South African, but they keep in contact with, and their knowledge, they used to work for Goldman Sachs, and their knowledge of finance markets or whatever is pretty incredible. So I was trying to get some information from them because we worked on an ICO project back in 2017. Crypto's going to run again. But what they were saying down in South Africa is, there was he sent me an article. The people came in at night and cleared out entire fields of spinach. So there's spinach theft, all kind of food theft. But we saw this in 2008 and 9 also in Thailand when people come in at night and just harvest entire fields of rice that were ready for harvest just in the middle of the dark. And then a farmer would come by and their entire field was harvested. Well, the same thing down in South Africa in Cape Town. They hired, or they took out an entire 2 fields that were acres and acres of spinach. So it's coming to the point now where police and army are having running battles in Johannesburg with people that just want to go get food because they're starving to death. So you got to realize they're at the end where they have nothing left to lose. So they're using live rounds to try to get these people back in their homes because the government lost control of the supply chains and there's really nothing for the people to go buy. So this is the situation I think you're referring to, but
Yep.
It's a nasty plight down there. What's happening? You're going to starve to death in your house or go outside and get shot by troops? If we're going to go get food? Makes no sense.
Makes no sense. And then, in Africa, we heard about the locusts.
Yeah.
Last I heard is that it was in China. Haven't heard any more since the pandemic was started, but I'm sure that the locusts haven't taken notice of the COVID virus.
Look at the locust outbreak map. If you go to the Locust Explorer off the Food and Agriculture Organization from the UN, they have a Locust Explorer map.
I gotta look that up. Okay.
Yeah, take a look at that. It should be the Locust Explorer off the FAO there.
Okay.
And if you're able to find that map there right now, bring it up live, One thing you're going to notice is the locusts are signaling, it appears to be where this new shift in the intertropical convergence zone and cloud bands where they're moving to drop new moisture.
Mhm.
So since this is a multi-thousand-year pattern, what it's the locusts are showing us where the newest of the grow zones are starting to emerge first. And you know what's funny? It's in the Fertile Crescent. It's in Harappa. It's over in the Indus Valley. So when you start to see where all these locusts are with this huge amount of new rainfall, it's in the same areas of the cradles of civilization through history that we're so used to hearing about. Mesopotamia, the Fertile
Yeah.
Crescent, land of milk and honey. This is where the locusts are, and if you can find those maps up there, it truly will signal you where it is. And then another one that you need to look for is North Central Africa out in the southwest in Libya, because their water irrigation project is still dumping an enormous amount of water out southwest, and it's creating, well, it's just adding to, it's a natural outflow area that was an inland delta 4,000 years ago. They were catfish and everything down there. The locusts are responding, and you're going to find this hot spot right in the southwest corner of Libya. That's because the water is now growing a lot of things in addition to the above ground rainfall.
Mm-hmm.
Because this year, Morocco, all-time record grain harvest. Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt, Chad, Mauritania, Eritrea all had record grain harvest this year.
Wow.
2019, I should say. That just signals an increase in rainfall. They're just able to grow more crops. Yeah, they might have better fertilizers, better seed selection, whatever. But notice where the locusts are. They're signaling where the areas where the new rainfall is, because it's called the carrying capacity. These locusts couldn't be there. There wouldn't be enough for them to eat under normal conditions because it's a desert. But now look where all these locusts are. They're signaling you where all the new grass is growing.
I love this. This is interesting, David. I had not heard that. Okay.
So look at it in a different way. I talked to a couple guys who are biblical scholars, and they, also with the Torah, and they were talking about the plagues of the old, and I was like, well, look at it in a different way. It's showing you where the new grow zones are emerging. They're like, oh, we never thought about it. We always thought it's a detrimental, and I'm like, it is a detrimental thing. They're eating all the food, starvation. But look where they're showing you where the new areas are going to start growing first. So as we march back in the last 30 years of military history across our planet, who's been in these places the whole time?
Yeah. I think I actually found the place where we're looking for, David. And
you could put desert, you could just put locust map in any browser or search engine, and locust map will bring you something up there, and you'll come to the first one, and then they have the updates, and you can see the hot red spots with all the red dots.
Yeah. Well, now of course my computer suddenly decides to slow
Freeze
down.
me too. Mine's kind of frozen. I just see a circle spinning there.
Yeah, it's like, well, what happened here?
We started talking about that subject. That's what happened.
Yep. And people are out there, I guess. Anyone in the chat room find it as well?
Yeah, just a real simple search engine search, locust map.
Yeah, finally.
Let me see if I can send you one through. This is what I did for a presentation last week. So my whole thing about the presentation last week was Marib Dam. Keep this on your radar. It's called Marib Dam, M-A-R-I-B, and it's in Yemen. Here, desert locust risk map. It's the first thing you come to. If you put in locust map, it'll be your second entry down there. I'm using DuckDuckGo. That's me though. And then you'll find Locust Watch, Desert Locust Watch. You want to go into the risk maps on the left side. It'll say 2020 to 2029.
David, do you see this? I just pulled one of the maps up.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. All right. So India, you see where all the dark red is and all the green?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Greens are the beginning swarms. So we'll go part by part, because I dissected this for a talk last week. Harappa and the civilization in the Indus Valley is between Pakistan and India, right on that border there. And this is a cradle of civilization. You got to realize we're going back some 3,500, 4,000 years in the past here. But a cradle of civilization is where our art, architecture, languages, mathematics all rose out of certain places on the planet. The most famous would be like Mesopotamia in Iraq and Iran area. that whole mess, but Fertile Crescent Valley all the way over to Israel and Jordan and that kind of thing.
Yep.
But the Fertile Crescent, or one of the Fertile Crescent there, but Indus Valley, and you'll see the dark red, but then you have all the green. Those are emerging swarms that are going to turn into the red in about another month or so. So look at the concentration on these areas that are some of the driest in the planet. You can see a massive shift there. And then if we go over west of that and go over to Iran, they had the biggest rains ever recorded even since the Silk Road trading days over 2018 and 19. And you can see why there's so many locusts lining up over there. They're at the feeding trough. They're at the feeding trough. And then, I noticed right there, you got Muscat. That's in Oman and Yemen. These are some of the driest places on the planet that are turning into real verdant areas. Yeah, in the center of Saudi Arabia near Riyadh as well. These areas are starting to pool water in the deserts. So now we got a whole bunch of wildflowers and different kind of vegetation growing. The herders are loving it because they don't have to buy fodder for their animals anymore. They're getting free animal food basically out of all these new plants growing in the desert. Their herds are increasing. The milk production's increasing, and the farmers are just really making a lot of money now. What they used to be a real impoverished class in the Middle East, but now since they have the goats and milk's becoming more expensive, meat, etc., they're becoming the wealth class again, because that was a 2-year switch from incredibly impoverished into, wow, look at all this money we have because our herds are increasing, and the goats are giving 2 lambs per birth now, and then their herds have increased. And look at the amount of locusts that are lining up in Iran. The center of Saudi Arabia should not be, it should be a desert, but it's not. It's becoming grass covered.
Yeah, I thought that that middle part there in Saudi Arabia was, nothing but sand. Look at this. A lot of green on this map.
Yeah, those are the beginning hopper swarms. Now, they haven't turned into swarms yet, but wherever you see a green dot, it's going to turn into a red dot.
Whoa.
And the swarms are what those stuff you're seeing in the news, where it's blocking out the sun, and you got 500 million or a billion little insects moving to the next place to nibble. Every one of those green dots is going to turn into a swarm. This is a scary thing, like how fast it's going to emerge. And if you back out, that's a great one. Now go down to Yemen. You see where Yemen is? And if you can zoom in on the center there with Yemen, I would like to show you something there.
Let me see if it'll. So does it finish loading? Look at it. I can't get over in India. I mean, all right.
So a little history lesson. Marib Dam is in this place called Yemen, right on the coast, that has Port Aden. Now, Port Aden is now controlled by Western forces, and they can block off the Red Sea, which means they can block off China's access point to Port Sudan. So China will no longer be able to export food out of there. They'll have to go out of Tanzania. But the thing about Yemen is the Marib Dam, the last accounts of the Marib Dam having water in it were 1,200 years ago, around the 800 AD era. And this is the last time Marib was recorded to have like water holding that would irrigate the desert so the frankincense plants could be grown. Because everywhere you see that green going up Saudi Arabia from Yemen, that was the frankincense route that would deliver that up to Istanbul. And today, in the last 40, 50 years, you would die going up there. Even when cars would break down, you would dehydrate and die and fry in the desert. But before, they would take camel trains and move up through there because it was milk and honey land. They were just going through verdant field after pasture land, after, date plantation and palms. And now it's a dry desert. But they used to take camels from Yemen all the way to Istanbul with frankincense, with the military, and hundreds of people per caravan, all living, off the land, stopping and never-ending trade routes going up, all fully supplied. They never talked about shortages. But the last time the Marib Dam was full was, and I wasn't even full at that time, it was 800 AD. Now the Marib Dam's starting to fill again. Although it's a remnant of itself, the archaeological ruins are there, but this last mass flash flood they had, 3.5 years worth of rain in a day, are right there on that corner where you're looking at Aden. And Aden flooded, the whole city flooded. I mean, they had water up to the 2nd floor of the buildings. And then on the backside of the mountain range, it filled up, and part of the Marib Dam started to fill again. All right, we're going back 2,500 years at the minimum on this here, at the minimum. And then all those red dots are all the locust or outbreak have turned into swarms, where there's so much food out in the desert, in the driest place on the planet. Atacama Desert and here. You got the two driest places on the planet, half a world apart. There's so much food growing out there that these locusts are swarming in the billions where you see red dots. That's how much plant growth is out there now. You talk about a 2,000 to 4,000 year shift in rain cycle. Governments know it. It's affecting food production already. World population was being cut in half anyway. So for all world governments to work together to come and do a COVID lockdown and destroy the economy wouldn't matter, doesn't matter. Money will have very little value moving forward in these next 10 years. As all this resets globally with the food production, nothing will matter at this point. It really doesn't now anyway. Now it's more like damage control to control the citizens while the powers stay in power during the collapse because of this 4,000 year or at the minimum 2,000 year cycle. We are at the end of an era truly in terms of food production, economy, society, and civilization. We're being reset. It's a fourth turning on a 1,000-year cycle, not the regular 80-year. So
this is a fascinating aspect of, again, you don't hear this in the news, and I'm sure that many other that are listening to this and will listen to it again, is the fact that I was unaware that the, river of, I guess, moisture, rain, the whole rain currents had shifted this radically.
And this quickly. See, another thing that I think we're being misled about is how quickly this climate can shift, because, they're always teaching us in terms of ice ages, it takes 100,000 years and it takes 50,000 years for this thing to shift and that thing to shift. I am saying that the things they're telling us take centuries or millennia to shift time can take just less than a decade. I think we've been misled on how fast things can shift, because that's a narrative control. Because if you knew this would shift that quick, you would really be questioning a lot of other things as well. And that the stability and perception they gave us that everything would, limit the temperature by 2100, where all this is going off, this is going to go off in less than a decade here. So they distracted everybody out at the 100-year mark when we should have been looking way closer in right here.
How many people are we talking about in this area? Because, again, I'm sitting here because my perception is that Saudi Arabia, Yemen, this whole area is desert. It's I did get some videos, I remember about a year ago, of the torrential storms in Saudi Arabia. Some of the citizens actually from Riyadh sent one, but David, I'm looking at this and I'm really quite, this is an eye opener. Huge.
And if you want to open your eyes further, if you go to another site, since you have your browser open, I see there, go to this site called Watchers News, WATCHERS News. And this, what they do is they follow all the extreme weather news that comes across, and they consolidate it into a place. It's one of my favorite sites because you can consolidate by floods, volcanoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, or whatever your flavor is of the month. So watchers.news is where it's at, Watchers News.
Okay.
I should have a red bar on the top there. And then just type in the browser bar like Yemen or Saudi Arabia, and what you think and your perception of these places is exactly like we grew up with. I mean, never ending blowing sand dunes, nothing grows out there, but in reality, it's fields now out there. It's been like that for a couple years. So when you start to take a look at the buildup of the imagery in your mind of the Middle East being a dry place versus reality, what you really get in front of you, something different. So Watchers News, and just like type Yemen up into the box, or something like that, or even put Saudi Arabia and you'll see some of the field pictures out there. But the Yemen picture was the most startling, because I could say they got 3.5 years worth of rain in a day, but it doesn't make sense until you go down to the more featured articles down there. Right there, that first little tab, the blue one that says more featured articles. Not the editor's pick, the one further up. But yeah, right there, more featured articles. And then just kind of scroll down through until you find the Aden picture. And I'll just let your eyes, feast yourself. And you might have to go down to page 2 maybe, but we're looking for Yemen inside there. And, water restrictions in Saudi Arabia, of course. And I'll let you just, go to page 2. Oh, there's Kazakhstan. See the floods there? That country you were talking about, the exports of the grain?
Yeah, I mean, Good Lord.
Look how much flooding their fields are. Yeah, you're going to go a little further down. We got record snow in Australia, record cold in Australia. See, that didn't make much on the news, did it? Coldest
No,
ever recorded in this month in May in Australia. And then look how cold it was below normal there, that purple. Coldest since the 1960s. Didn't hear about that.
is it
And there it
Oregon?
is. Yeah, right there. Hit that Aiden picture. That's how much rain came down in the driest place on the planet. Can you believe that? 3.5 years worth of rain in a day. That's how much water's coming down. And that's on the backside of the mountain range. That's what refilled part of that old dam that was active, say, 2,500 years ago or so.
Hmm.
The driest place on the planet, one of them. And this is how much flooding has occurred there in a single day. See, these are the outliers that the media is not picking up on. But if you string enough of them together, you can start to find a pattern.
Look at this. You can actually see the current of moisture.
It's shifted, hasn't it? Yeah, it's coming. Yeah, it's definitely shifting across the West African monsoon, and that pressure vacuum, because the high altitude winds are shifting, it's creating a vacuum or low pressure where all that's moisture is getting now pulled inland from the Atlantic Ocean. Before it was being pushed further north toward Europe, but now that vacuum difference of the low pressure, it's pulling it all across. This is the new setup. This is why I think armies have been there fighting. It's going to be the new grow zone.
And you know, I always recall Kissinger, you know, he who controls the food controls the world. I did not know this. I'm going to keep this one in. Very cool website. Thank you.
Oh, it's one of my favorites. I go there all the time. I don't actually report on each individual story because I mean, they do it themselves. What I try to do is, you know, find 5, 6, 8, 10 things that are related and then make that into a story and try to put a wider tapestry on it. This is a trend, not a single story, because one single story doesn't really make the trend. The single story is a single story, but go back 4 or 5 years and start finding these extreme events in the same place again and again, then you can find the trend. And if you can find the mechanism for upper level wind changing, then you can find why the West African monsoon's shifting, and then you'll find out why all this is happening. But see, these shifts on the West African monsoon only come on every couple thousand years. So it seems to happen way faster than we're told it could. That's my whole thing.
Yeah, I think this is quite fascinating. I'm just 5 inches of rain when they're used to getting 1.4. That's just amazing.
Per year.
Per year. Yeah, that's nuts.
This will be some per year. Yeah, that's crazy.
This is a great website. Thank you, David. This is one where we can keep informed. I'm looking back here in Australia. You know, it was not realized how cold it got there because they had all the fires in their summer season this year. Yeah.
Well, that's the duality of it. The extremes are going to get more extreme as our Earth keeps getting tugged a little closer to the sun during the summer and a little further away from the sun during the winter months. Northern Hemisphere.
Do you see the magnetic pole shift having effect on what we're seeing in particularly, you know, the shifting of these currents of moisture over countries where they were typically dry?
I would say yes, it has to be predicated in part on that, but I don't have enough information to give you a very solid yes or no. And all I know is that it's moving at about 1 degree of latitude per year now. So when we start to think about 1 degree of latitude, that's 60 miles. So after 5 years, that's 300 miles difference. Now the magnetosphere is the thing that locks the jet streams in place. This is directly affected by changes in the sun on this grand solar minimum or multi-millennia cycle of low solar activity that then affects our magnetosphere, which is the thing that locks the jet streams in place. Now, how much of a more unlock or untwist of the screw is it with the magnetic poles wandering? So now you're starting to get like double layered effects where this magnetic pole movement was never factored into any prior grand solar minimum, but now we seem to be at it, right? So I personally don't have the answer. I'm doing more research every day, but it very well could have another layer on top of causation versus just magnetospheric weakening because of the sun stepping down into a several thousand-year low in solar activity. It's got to have some effect, but I just don't know how much.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And I think, again, it's a science that most don't really know about it. Ben Davidson does a pretty good job on that.
He does.
Folks, I apologize for the buffering issues. It's not our fault. It's just the way it is. I can see some people are having an issue on that, but Ben, I really enjoy Ben because he has I think a very level-headed approach. And with the poles, the North Pole now moving into Siberia, um, there seems to be some effects to it. What that will be, I don't know. It's
What do you
above my
feel? What do you see though? What do you feel on the end of it? Because you're studying a lot of this as well. What do you think that polar movement over Siberia has anything to do with shifts? Do you have an idea?
well, maybe this is non-relevant, but where I live, I've lived here for 15 years. The back of our house faces the west. And I have my telescopes out there, and I have seen that Venus, who was in the southwest sky, is now moved into more of a west northwest position. Now, that's interesting, it could be changing, but I feel that with the poles shifting the way that they are doing, that we're going to see, my personal opinion, I think we're going to see some really bizarre weather. I think that the pockets of warm air that typically stayed in the mid-tropics area are now being shifted more up into a northern position. And I think that if it continues the way it is, I think we're going to see some radical weather changes.
The
I think the
spillover,
Southwest will become a tropical paradise.
I do too, because go back 4,000 years and see what that place looked like.
Exactly.
Why do you think the Anasazi Indians and the Hopi,
Thank you.
why is everybody living there and they abandoned their underground or that, they even abandoned the cliff dwellings, but why did they go to the cliff dwellings? Because if you even go further back and study, they weren't in cliff dwellings originally.
Yeah.
That was a transition during some kind of tumultuous thing happened. They had a normal society like we did. We just lived in the land, the flat land, full of vegetation.
Yeah.
Then they're living up in cliff dwellings and then they disappeared completely. What happened?
Something caused them to go to higher ground.
True.
And I don't know what that is. But because you have so much, let me tell you the other concern I have, David, is the Beaufort Gyre up, and I think yeah, it is the Beaufort Gyre. Um, when I start seeing mainstream climatologists start saying something's bad potentially here, that if that ever lets loose and gets into the Gulf Stream and the North Atlantic flow, um, even Ben has said this, it's going to be a rough day on the Northern Hemisphere.
Day after tomorrow kind of instant shock thing.
Yeah, a little bit extreme on their end, but yet I think the premise was absolutely correct.
I think the premise is correct too, that they're showing you how fast things can shift. Now, it was a little extreme that it shifted in 3 days into an ice age over the Northern Hemisphere, but it is predicated on extremely rapid shifts. The peer-reviewed research shows that we go from our present climate into an ice age setting within 10 years. That's the fastest they've seen it onset. Now, we're not talking about 2 miles of ice over Chicago at that point. What they're talking about is the lock-in of new patterns that send moisture to all these areas that never melt. But the setup, moving cloud bands and cells and jet streams into new positions to lock in to start all this new either extreme droughts in some areas on ice ages, or extreme precipitation that just came down even summer snowfall, winter snowfall in less than 10 years. Places became uninhabitable in less than 10 years. Peer-reviewed research, tens of thousands of papers done on this.
Yeah.
So why
the
is it they
mammoths.
keep dragging us along in regular mainstream high school or whatever, that it takes 17,000 years to shift out of something?
And when you bring up the mammoths, not one, but hundreds of them, thousands of them actually, freezing within less than 10 seconds.
Yeah, you did I remember listening to you talk about that.
Yeah,
You have much
yeah,
more knowledge on that than I do. You were
yeah.
talking about like piles of bones of things all crushed
Oh,
together and thing.
the thing about it is they used to sell in the 30s and 40s up in Alaska mammoth steaks, because the thaw had started and they were literally scattered about everywhere. But the thing is, I did the math on this, and they typically weighed 1,000 pounds or more, and to have food in their mouth, in the esophagus, going into their digestive system, freeze as well, without the cells exploding. That that signals something so radical that I don't think modern man can comprehend it, David.
That would mean something from space came down in a vortices directly from above us, and actually the temperature of space touched the Earth's
Thank you, sir.
crust
That
here.
you're one of the very few people, David, that have actually connected a vortex of some kind that literally was like punching a hole in a balloon.
Yeah, some people say from the comet, because it's like if you throw a rock in the water, you get that splash. When it comes down, it splashes again and it refills. So would a cometary impact on an ice sheet do the same thing? It would create that hole in that vacuum, and then everything will get filled in that quick. Not
It it
sure.
it's still one of the things that I think man sometimes overestimates his his smarts, so to speak, because uh we're living it. I tell people, and I know this is a little bit off subject, but our economy is going to impact this whole subject matter of food as well.
Already is.
Yeah, I'll just be candid with everyone. I don't see how you put 40 million people back to work overnight.
You don't.
You don't. And I told the story earlier in the chat room. I was in the store and on Saturday, and there was a family who they didn't have enough money, David, to pay for the food that they had. They weren't buying extravagantly. And, I stepped up there and, said, listen, I'll go ahead and pay. I paid for the whole thing.
Oh, I would have
And
paid for their extra too, for sure. Family
yeah,
like that, if they weren't buying beer or anything,
oh,
I would
no,
have for
no,
sure
no.
paid for
I
it.
looked at their cart and, I told them, I said, put your debit card away. I'll go ahead and cover this. But I think we're going to see much more of that.
And at what point does that father or mother go out and start stealing or whatever they do to get money to buy the food, take the food to feed their family? And at that point, there's things that we talk about, laws and criminality. You got a huge blur in the line there between survival and crime. Like
Yeah.
where are we going to move with that? And what will the response be from, because they used to hang people for pickpocketing, right?
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
And they also, the King's Guards used to execute people for taking or as much as a hen off of the king's land.
Hmm.
So it seems like we're doing a lot of repeating in history here.
Like we're going back through the cycle again. And it was the father wasn't there. It was just the mom. And sh I know she was embarrassed. And as I told her, I said, it's all right. It was, yeah, I'll start getting emotional about it because it bothers me that we as a society have lost, I don't know, and I think it's an indicator, David, of something that's brewing out there, as you said. Something is brewing.
Yeah, it certainly is. And please understand the carrying capacity of the current amount of food we can grow with these changes in this grand solar minimum. It's not going to, 50% of the planet is going to perish during this time. This was the forecast. The beginning forecast was best estimate 75% of people carry through. That's if everything
Hmm.
stayed intact. The economy stayed intact. The food supply chains stayed intact and functioned at 100% with restricted economy and just restricted import taxes, export taxes. We still had the fuels flowing.
Yep.
All the ships were moving. Airplanes were still moving around. Now you start to take a look at that on that best case scenario off the think tanks, comparatively to what we need to snip around the edges now to go, whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, that's 75% best case scenario. Suddenly we're cutting out air travel. Supply chains are cutting off. You need to start trimming around the edges everywhere. And suddenly that 75% turns into 60, and some of the low ball forecasts, it's 50. So how do you as global governance, and I don't mean like the global government, but in a global governance standpoint where each individual still has autonomy, or the country does, as a worldwide body that every country knows what's going on, how does the globe continue to function where it doesn't go straight into a state of anarchy without there being some control in the middle somewhere? And this is, I think, where we're at now, is next year, this harvest season, when it comes, the thing about Kazakhstan's wheat export ban, that makes sense. They sold everything. They understand they need to keep it for themselves. But what's not being talked about in the news that should be a front page news is during the COVID lockdown in China, they didn't plant on time. They missed the planting for the rice, the corn, and the wheat. We in America have missed so many planting dates as well. We're not even going to be remotely close to 100% planted where we should be. I think I saw some numbers. We're at 27% now, and we should be at 50%. That's even lower than the floods. In
David, I had
Australia,
completely
they're
forgotten
importing food
about that
now.
in
Yeah,
China.
yeah. There's no planting. There's very little planting going on now across the planet. Everybody's missed their plant dates. Now, who's going to be there? Labor's not there. Supply chain's broken down. Fertilizer shortages, seed shortages, no labor, people COVID. And you expect what's going to come with the harvest season when we go into 2.0, like November, when people are going to get sick again, locked down? What's going to happen to the harvest? They're not going to get harvested either. This is an insane position we're in right now, and nobody's talking about it.
In the San Joaquin Valley, they showed in the Wall Street Journal the farmers plowing under lettuce fields and fields. Why? Because the migrant workers can't get into the fields. And we just hit on two big points. I think the whole thing with China, it never eclipsed my mind to think about, okay, how many is that? 1.4 billion people out there. If they're missing their planting season, and then we just looked at India, that swarm is heading towards them. I mean, they have what, 1.8 billion. The migrant workers that we become dependent on in the United States to harvest our food, they can't get to the fields, so the food thus goes to waste.
Well, two things. If that field's full of lettuce, why did they not call on the public just to come out and free pick?
Good idea. Good point.
You know,
Very
that's a
point.
travesty. We have all this food grown. Why can't the local community come out and at least get food for the local city? That's just criminal. And secondly, I just read some article yesterday that Governor Newsom is going to keep the state locked down until August. So if it's right now, there's very little planting going on in terms of fruit and veg and harvesting, et cetera, migrant movement. What's it going to be like for another 2 months, right through the middle of the harvest season, the middle of the planting season here for certain, fast growing veg? Only takes 6 weeks to get 6-8 weeks to get a spinach crop up. They're going to miss 2 whole rounds of veg for the rest of and I can see why the prices are spiking across the US. You're going to have to grow your own food. Please learn how. One thing you take away from this lesson, the things we're talking about here, these are the catalysts, the events. The real world ramifications for you or your food, you need to learn how to grow food. And I'm serious, do whatever you can. There's so much free resource online. There's an enormous amount of seed stores open now. If your area, if not, just order it online. You need to plant your own food. Make mistakes now. Learn how to grow. Get with your friends, your family, your neighbors. Get a garden going.
Learn to can. My wife has taught me canning. I make large batches of stew and we can it. We know how to do that. And, down in our basement, it works, folks. And that's how our great-great-grandparents, that's how they had to live.
Hashtag think like your grandma.
Ooh, good one.
Yeah, right.
One. I love that.
Because we're going back to a pioneering lifestyle. If we're sitting here, both of us, and we're from we do different research in different areas. If we're both coming at the very center point, this is going to be an integral center point for survival, is learning how to can and grow food. Perhaps there's something there you might want to take away from the conversation.
So we've planted our garden. We do the big planters because we have rabbits here. And, we've already gotten our jars ready because, this is where the tomatoes are going to go. This is where the cucumbers, the squash, etc. And I enjoy canning now. It's actually a lot of fun. It is. But we won't go hungry, and people that are around us won't go either.
Now, don't underestimate your favorite sweet potato, because as a sweet potato grows, you can eat the leaves as a green. And then sweet potato is just a huge, huge harvest. And it has almost everything you need for the human body in terms of carbohydrates, micronutrients, sugars, etc.
There's that restaurant off of Alcoa Highway that used to be, it's known for their baked potatoes, the sweet potatoes.
Yeah. And you can
date myself, but Knoxville was a great town. Anyway, I know that because they were renowned for their baked sweet potatoes.
Yep. And it's been people survived on coconuts and fish, living on islands forever and being stranded. So there's some foods across our ecosystem here that have enough support in there with sugars, water, nutrition, carbohydrates, micronutrients, et cetera, to keep a body at least at functional livability. Now, will you be running a marathon just eating potatoes? No. But if you had your own veg, you had the sweet potatoes, you had a chicken or two out there, you're trading somebody for eggs, then we're getting back into a more regular lifestyle of food again, right?
I tell you, you have a whole different attitude when you're growing it. You know, I'll share a little story with you, David. We were blessed with someone sent 2 live Maine lobsters. I'll never eat lobster again. I got to tell you, I can't do it anymore.
Why is that?
Well, I don't know. They were alive. The lobsters were, and I don't know. Both of them, I swear, just looked at me as I dunked them into that boiling water. And I said, I told Lynn, I said, I can't eat these things now. I said, I swear the last one was looking at me like going, Steiger, what are you doing, man? And anyway,
You got to put the knife right through the center of the head and kill them just that 1 second before you put them in the
I
water,
mean, they didn't tell me that. They didn't tell me that. Anyway, so,
Yeah, poor little, yeah, you don't want to drop them straight in,
oh
like put them out of
man,
their misery a few seconds before.
reminds me of the crawfish boils we used to have down in the South, but
Well, those are a little different. It's hard to put on each individual one and then with a
it's
little
true.
thing.
Anyway, David, this hour has just gone by. Just, I can't thank you enough. Your knowledge, your perspective on things. It's sobering, but it's also refreshing that to have the knowledge allows you to prepare for steps going forward.
It's all the same steps we're all going to need to take anyway. So just better to start talking about the information, because trying to watch a chat board is moving by pretty quick. We'll
Yeah.
try to review it later on, but it's about us just sharing the information together. Everybody's got a tip, you're
Yeah.
talking about, I got one vegetable, you got the canning, there's a whole bunch. And now how many of these 280 something people watching each have their own individual tip? I bet if we got one idea, one tip from everybody, and we had 285 ideas listed on a piece of paper, that would be the most epic, read in just a PDF or something that was put out there of one single tip that each person watched put on there. Hey, you could think about this, think about doing salt with this, think about this vegetable, think about that, think about a million things. You got 285 minds working together on it versus just me by myself, you by yourself, or even just the two of us talking here. I mean, 285 people is quite a sizable mind capacity to share ideas and get solutions together.
I wish everyone would leave one idea. I think I'll share this with you. I know we're going a little bit over, but this is important. We've got to learn how to barter again, and we've got to learn to form the local co-ops. Because I told people yesterday, the farmers here need help. They can't get their cattle to the meat processing plants. They're all shut down because of the COVID. And I said, if 10 people got together, put in $100, that's $1,000. You could buy literally a whole cow, have it processed and delivered, and each family would walk away with well over 100 pounds of meat.
Yeah, I was working on something for my Patreon channel just yesterday talking about exactly that. It was usabeef.com, I believe.
Okay.
And what you can do is you can find a local farmer that's a producer of cattle that is, let's see if I can find that here.
US beef.
Yeah, usabeef.org, usabeef.org. Now, what you can do is in there, you can find your local farmer that's selling any kind of meats or eggs, produce. And then obviously those farmers who are selling meats will probably know farmers that are selling vegetables. But it's all for your local area, and you just type it in by your state or by your county, and it'll show you local farmers who are selling directly to the public in a response to what has happened here. So this is another way for us to get closer to and send the money directly to the farmers, and where you're getting the food from. And then that's about building, your knowledge and your friendship with them. So when things do get tough, they've already known you for a year or two buying off of them. That's not just somebody walking off the street going, I'm hungry, here's my money. There'll be a line of people with that. But if they already know you, and you'll have a heads up and a head start on getting first in line for the food by knowing your local farmer.
Well, I see this as an opportunity. If you live in the Denver area, let me know. I know I have a lot of subscribers in here. We can get this thing together, because when the growers, the local farmers start producing, this is going to be a great way to barter. I mean,
Yes.
I could give you 10 pounds of, good steak, good hamburger. you would probably have, you know, a small bushel of corn, fresh produce that I can't grow in my backyard. I like this.
Everybody's going to have their own thing. I do
David,
microgreens too.
excellent idea, folks. This is, see, we left you with something positive. It's all not doom and gloom. There is a
No,
way
it's
to
not.
work
There's a
through
lot of
this.
solutions. A lot of solutions.
Awesome.
Stay
Yeah.
positive.
Yeah.
Smile today.
Listen, they've made it through, mankind has made it through virtually every disaster. We always come back, and I think the ones that do are the ones who kept a level head. David, that's just my opinion.
Of course. You think this thing we're going through now, can you imagine a cometary impact slamming on an ice sheet that drops the global temperature 20 degrees Celsius in a day or two? Oh, I mean, there's nothing. We're going to live through this. Are you kidding me?
Listen, I love the cold. I mean, you know, I'm more living here in Colorado. Long johns really do work. That's all I can say. They really do. Well, David, thank you. I've left your channel down there. Tell people where they get in touch with you. You know, I imagine they already know that, but hey, anytime we can get to someone who hasn't heard, it's a good thing.
You can go to Adapt 2030 there on YouTube. Finally, over 100,000 subscribers, even with the censorship. Yay.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Took me a while. Probably more closer to 200,000, but you know, the YouTube algorithm doesn't like what I have to say. And then oilseedcrops.org is my website where I take all this, what we're talking about now, and put it in a printed form so you can save the PDFs and then share the images and graphs with other people. Because it's really about having that quiver of knowledge and graphs and charts so you can talk to other people about it. And if they say, I'd never heard of that, we'll go, whoosh, here you go. Here's a whole bunch of charts for you to look at. Like that website, The Watchers. Very few people saw these floods or hear about them. This isn't a site that only consolidates extreme weather events. So you never hear about this kind of stuff. You have to go out and look for it. So I try to put it all into a written format, simple click and go, click and download, tons of info. So you can start the discussion without having an argument.
Excellent. I'll tell you, I'll get that link and I'll put it when I repost this as well. David, I am a better person because I've learned something in here that I know will go to my benefit. And I just appreciate the favor that you've shown the audience here and myself. I thank you. I really do.
Well, I'm glad you have so many subscribers as well, so we can share it together. Because think about that, between your subscriber base and mine, how much further this information is going to flow out. And it's the same thing with everybody watching. You know, who do you know that you can share this information with that then can then share it on further? Because there was an enormous amount of helpful things that we talked about today that could be used in every single person's daily life moving forward from this point forward. Everybody on the planet can benefit from this talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, my friend.
Wayne, I'm so glad we got a chance. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I tell you, David, you're the best. I appreciate you.
Oh, hey, True Helper. Thanks up for that.
Well, thank you. And stay with me as we leave here, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed to David's channel, go over there and do it. You'll be much better for it. And we'll talk to you later. Thank you, everyone.